Focus. All right, click the links for Odysee, Bit Chute, or to join the channel, become a valued, trusted member of the inner circle, or to support the channel via various other means. This is what is known as a straw man argument. In case you're not looking at the screen, it says Screenrant claims manga is just as political as anything published by Marvel or DC. Gets roasted by fans who know the difference. The straw man aspect of that is the word political. That means it's not the crux of the argument. Nobody cares. Really, that's not really the heart of the argument. That's not probative and directed to what is at issue. Comics have always been political. Okay, so Screenrant saying comics and manga are practically the same thing. They're not selling the same. Must be that manga has a better distribution method or better publicity or something. Manga probably has $1 billion film industry to push its name recognition to the masses. That's probably what's going on. Manga has a huge, the huge Japanese version of Hollywood where they're pushing worldwide movies at the $1 billion level to get their versions of, Superman and Spider-Man out to the masses. That's Japan. Oh, no, that's that's actually Hollywood and America. America has this $1 billion film industry, literally billions of dollars just in the film industry to push the names of the comic book characters out to the public. And so there's going to be some overflow when you're flooding the films. There's like 6 Spider-Man movies, or at least Spider-Man is in probably a half a dozen, huge movies that get disseminated across the world. Spider-Man. So you've got that name in your head, and then kids go, "Oh, aren't there some comics?" I know this is based on the opening blurb of the movie's got that Marvel scene with the Stan Lee and the comics and all that. Goes, "Oh, yeah, I haven't read a comic in a while. My parents used to read comics. My grandparents read comics. When I go to a comic book store and go look at some comics, there's all these $1 billion movie industry. They're talking about all these. I almost said He-Man, but Hulk." I'll go to the comic book store and go look at Spider-Man and Superman and Batman and all these cool characters. God, I love those Batmans from, 15 years ago. Those were those 2 peak Batmans. A little bit darker take on kind of an already dark character. So you go to the comic book store and you look at these comics, you're like, oh, what the fuck is this? It's like transgender furry otherkin Batman. He's crying. All he does is cry. In the movies, he wasn't crying. Yeah, because the movies cost $250 million to make a movie. Batman probably cost that. Or whatever, Spider-Man. It's like all these movies are costing over $100 million to make. So you go to the comic store and like, oh, Peter Parker is purple-haired, non-binary, respecting pronouns or something? I don't care about this. Nobody cares about this. Oh, hey, here's a lecture on Latinx from the Hulk. What the... Oh, hey, here's another lecture on the Second Amendment. Why don't they put this crap in the movie? If they put this crap in the movie, no one would go buy the comics. They don't put it in the movies because the movies are $100 million investments, where comics are orders of magnitude less expensive. So you've got this massive industry pushing these names. Oh, Superman should be fantastic. Oh, he's actually BLT in the comics. And someone in the Twitter was saying, the original Superman, admittedly, was Superman 4. He gathers up all the nukes and he tosses them into the sun. And I guess that the modern version of Superman is BLT, and he's marching, carrying a sign, something about words. It's like, how the mighty have fallen, really, At least in Superman 4, he took action, he did something. It's like, maybe it is not his place to get involved in human affairs that way. But 40 years later, the modern BLT Superman is just marching, and he's got a boyfriend. So, how many people does that appeal to? Because most of the world is, pretty heterosexual. It doesn't matter, bigot. It doesn't matter. Sales, we're in a post-profit industry. Yeah, they're absolutely in a post-profit industry. Anyway, so they're comparing manga to comics, and there's examples of manga using President Trump as a character. They used him as a character because he was president for that 4-year period that they were publishing the manga. And it was just a neutral character compared to how American comics treat him. And then someone else was saying, this manga treats every American president like a buffoon, which is, well-deserving. So the take is they're not treated equally because we're not idiots. I mean, Who do you think you're selling this to? Because the American audience is not buying. The American audience so hates American comics, and I hate to call them American comics because I don't think there's any American involved in making Marvel and DC. They so hate that product that they're willing to go get Japanese comics that, I assume have to be translated. And probably some of the nuance is lost there unless you start to read a little Japanese. So it takes American comics to ramp up the level of cringe to just... Like, they're telling you this message, this far left, insane cat lady message that nobody gives two shits about because you don't respect the source of the information. It's not somebody great giving you this information. It's just a cat lady who's telling you some message that it's derivative. They're telling you some message on, like, climatology or something. It's like, they never had a physics class in their life, and they're just parodying information they heard from someone else, or something about how to gender Latin languages. It's like, this doesn't apply to you. This isn't important to you. It's not crucial to your identity. Why are you giving a lecture on it? Oh, because I heard it somewhere. I heard it was popular. I heard it was popular. All the kids are talking about this pronoun stuff or this gender language. We're gonna change French, Latin, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. Yeah, we're going to change all those languages because some current fad, because of some fad of the day invented by some Bolshevik professor just to throw a monkey wrench in. Oh yeah, that's a. So is it going to sell a lot of product? Like I said, we're beyond sales. We're in a post-sales environment. Yeah. So there's this semantic argument about the concept that everything is political. Yeah, that's fair enough. It's like saying everything done by humans has human traits attached to it. That's kind of another straw man too. Let's get specific. We're talking about far left globalists, and to be very specific, most of the stuff people have issue with is the anti-white, the misandry in modern comics from Marvel, DC, Image. Japan doesn't have the concept of anti-Japanese comics because Japan is for the Japanese. Comics are written by the Japanese. In the West, it's different. With diverse groups, you're going to get a lot of anti-white hatred and intolerance, bigotry, and prejudice, which is cringy because it's so obviously biased. Gee, really, you couldn't find any examples to balance that purse puppy equation? Couldn't find any balance to the other side of the scale of that story you're trying to push of the anti-people of the light. You couldn't find any issues, perhaps where POCs were not as exemplary as you would hold them up to be. How dare you? I'm just asking for a fair and balanced approach. Well, the Nazis wanted fair and balanced. Are you literally a Hugo Boss marching for fair and balance? They also burned books. Yeah, look at the stuff they burned. Holy cow. I would be tossing this stuff on the pile and Roman saluting happily to burn Marvel and DC. People are posting examples in the Twitter about the Japanese stuff as examples of politics. They don't actually show any politics in a biased manner. It shows Trump as a character, or is so subtle and nuanced that you can't tell the bias by one page, one image, one panel alone. Because Japan, and follow me here, is better than America by far. So commentary versus propaganda. It's like, it's only propaganda if you agree with it. We'll get into that. Can you obviously tell what side the author is on? Does he raise fair points of the same magnitude for both sides? Is it probative and relevant? SCWs are incapable of understanding this concept. Presenting both sides of an issue makes them outraged. Dana Schwartz at the Mary Sue, I think it was Dana Schwartz, or Rachel Leisman, these are the worst people on earth. God, they're hard. They show a full body picture of themselves, like she's drinking a Diet Coke and she's like 50 pounds overweight. And it's, I'm 50 pounds overweight myself, like most of us are, but it's like, we're not posting these full body photos as if we're, cute with the bodies we had as 20-year-olds. It's like, well, man, I'm in a sundress. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe just use a drawing, a cute stylized image of yourself Maybe ixnay, the full body image. Anyway, that idiot, she wanted to cancel South Park because they attacked both sides of an issue. They made fun of both sides. Authoritarians don't believe in two sides to a story. They're like children who are granted power. They're little sociopaths who think they know what is best for everyone. Off to the cornfields with you, if you remember that story from... I forgot. Twilight Zone. I think it was a Twilight Zone. So, why are Japanese comics outselling American comics like 100 to 1? One reason is Japanese comics are designed to sell, which sounds obvious until you think about it. Sales are the motive. American globalist comics are propaganda. Sales are secondary. Because American comics are essentially written by children in adult bodies. People in an alt-left echo chamber, they can only get... the only little bit of reality is sales. Sales, you can't fudge those numbers. I guess you can go digital and try to fudge the numbers, but eventually it's a ledger book, and like stuff is coming in black ink and stuff is going out in red ink. Either it balances or it doesn't. So the lack of sales are real. Manga sells because it's good. Globalist Marvel DC don't sell because it's Marxist propaganda. The SCWs on Twitter are trying to defend it and say, "Oh, manga's political too." Again, that's a straw man. It's not the heart of the argument. And they'll show examples of a comic panel. It'll have a ship and it'll have a name on the ship. It's a sailboat with a name on the ship. But then they show you another picture to explain that the name is also used as a real-world ship, presumably by a dictator. My point is, if they have to bend over backwards to explain the image, the picture itself is not enough to show you why it was propaganda. It's like naming a ship the Liberty and expecting people to catch the reference. Another panel shows a banana republic, and people are revolting, which is, that's just a standard image of revolutions for all people around the world for the past 2,000 years, as long as there's history. It's like somebody is standing with arms raised and the crowd is standing with weapons and arms raised. Okay, we get it. It's just your standard, revolution. And then they show a picture of Che Guevara, except the image in and of itself of the comic doesn't show the slant of any politics. It doesn't show who's the author rooting for, the revolutionaries or the establishment. It's like you have no idea just the image alone. But the Twitter kids have to show other images to show, oh, see, it's politics. It's like, yeah, but what are they saying? Oh, we don't know. We can't tell from the image alone because Japanese manga is subtle and nuanced. And American cancer is not. Anyway, so with Marvel and DC, the page clearly does show the slant of the politics because Japan is subtle. And Marvel and DC are simply not subtle. It's obviously comics written by globalists. People are showing examples of clearly alt-left Marvel and DC, and you can see the bias in one page. In and of itself, it clearly shows you that the writer's insane. So yesterday, you kids come back and they show manga that doesn't show the bias in one page. It's like you're not proving your point. You're proving the opposite because you can't find the bias in Japanese comics. And maybe if you could, it would be one image to 1,000 of American comics. And literally, go if you want examples of just ridiculousness, go read The Immortal Hulk by Al Ewing. Literally, the first issue is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy robbing a liquor store to go back to his blonde-haired, blue-eyed biker gang. And then there's a lecture on the Second Amendment in that issue, and then in following issues, there's more lectures on the Second Amendment. Just shut up, dude. You're such a pussy. The thing is, people don't want American comics. And, I hate to call them American because it doesn't feel like they're American. It feels like they were globalist cancer just waiting to metastasize. American comics have mostly been written by far left people. It was much more subtle 20 years plus ago. And really probably, like I said, if you're curious about comics and you're not familiar with it, go back to as far back as you can go across the spectrum, I don't know, in the 40s and 50s, and start reading. And you can stop at about 1990, maybe 2000. But I feel comfortable saying, 1990, if you stopped at 1990, everything pre-1990, you'd have a good time reading. Even in the 60s, 70s, you could tell which writers were globalists. Especially now, after taking so many red pills, I can go back and I see how ridiculous the comics had to twist and bend to straw man blonde guys robbing liquor stores or something equally stupid. 1978 comics, you get a blonde biker gang takes over a small town. Here the superheroes got to step in and stop that crime wave. It's like, Yeah, it was ridiculous even back then. But you know, when you're a kid, you're reading it, it just doesn't click until you get older and you start looking around like, oh, these were always kind of like this. It's just they were a little bit more soft-handed back in the day. Nowadays, you got to someone like some British couple, some blonde-haired, blue-eyed British couple is motorboating on a lake and they're just dumping bottles over into the lake, and the and there's a superhero is a POC in England. You know, some African girl flying around England who's the English purse puppy superhero, and she collects all the trash and she fills their boat with the trash. It's like, good, you taught those blonde-haired, blue-eyed English people a lesson. Thank God you were there. What would they have done without you? And the comics, I forget the guy who wrote it. He's a globalist who lives in England and writes these comics, and I think it's called Rivers of London. And they're as cringy as that. Like, it's all that kind of nonsense. And you look at him and you look at the comics like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I see you. I think, what's his name? I want to say Abramovic. Something Abramovic. He's insane. He's absolutely insane. The comics are insane. Like, I don't think they themselves sold that well, but I think they were made into a show, which is why the name is so popular still. My point is, as red-pilled adults, you can go back and read 1980s Batman, and it's still a good story in terms of good versus evil, but the evil characters all seem suspiciously fair-skinned for an East Coast crime-ridden city. Some blue-eyed gang versus some green-eyed gang. Yeah, it seems totally legit. So Screenrant tries to compare comics to manga. Manga sells, comics don't. There's not even a comparison. Comics have $1 billion Hollywood industry to help get the character name to the public, and they don't capitalize on it. That's the biggest wasted advertising campaign ever, and it's so bizarre that you've got Spider-Man's a whole household name, in the movies anyway, and then you look at the comics, you're like, why didn't you guys just try to do something similar to the movies? You can apply it to all the characters. Like Captain America is probably one of the most egregious examples. The Captain America movies, he's been in probably a half dozen movies, and then you go read the comics, you're like, oh, it's a Hugo Boss gang. Oh, hey, the last story was about a Hugo Boss gang in small town America being intolerant and prejudiced. Oh, hey, and the next story is about a Hugo Boss gang. Why? I mean, like, you want to cover like the Crips and the Bloods or anything like that? MS-13, Latin Kings, like the gangs that are actually in America, in every city in America, is that completely overlooked? You're talking like that's 99% of gang activity in America. 1% of gang activity or less are the Hugo Boss types. Literally. It's like 60% of the nation is accounting for less than 1% of that activity. And comics jump on and go, okay, we're going to focus on this less than 1% gang activity. That's insane. And people look at it and they're like, where are these blonde-haired motorcycle gangs? Yeah, we have people riding bikes. And there might be some involved in low-level crime. But if you look at the repercussions of it, it's like that's, again, less than 1% of the Malum and Say acts in America. It's like that's what comics focuses on. That's why American comics are being outsold by like the biggest manga like outsells the entirety of the U.S. comic industry. How do you hold an L that big and continue to write crap? Because they're ideologues. They're insane. What can I say? Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next episode.